This is the When Work Isn't Work podcast. This podcast exists to help people reignite the love of what they do in a post-pandemic world. The pandemic gave us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reflect on what is truly important to us in work and in life. I'm your host, Sinead Connolly, co-founder and director of Lotus People, an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency. We hope you enjoy today's chat. My guest today is the formidable Erin Evans. Erin has ran businesses since her early 20s and currently leads one of Sydney's leading tech recruitment agencies. An inspiring female leader within a heavily male-dominated world, Erin leans into her intuition and her understanding of herself to play to her strengths. She seems to achieve more in a day than the average human, and hopefully you take as much from this conversation as I did. Erin, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the When Work Isn't Work podcast. I am so very happy to have you here.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure. This podcast exists to help people reignite a love of what they do in a post-pandemic world by hearing from people who love their work. So you instantly came to mind. You were at the forefront of my imaginings when we were creating this. You bring so much passion to what you do. I'll let you speak a little bit about your businesses, your thriving businesses that you run. You are such an advocate for women in technology. You do incredible work with charities, and you're also a wife and a mum. The hours in the day that you seem to create are definitely more than most people I know, which is amazing. But I think what inspires me most is how much you do love what you do every day. So I'm super excited for people to hear the journey, people to hear from you. And hopefully it will inspire others to, learn to love what they're doing or to continue to love what they're doing as well. To kick us off, can you give us a brief overview of your career and your role as it stands today in its current state?
Well, first of all, thank you for that intro. That is no pressure at all.
It'll be easy.
But look, so as you can probably hear, my accent is entirely confused. I am born in Canada and I've been in Australia for coming on 14 years now. And I very much started my career in a entirely different domain than where I play now. I went to school for sports medicine. I was obsessed with working out, with science, with how the body works, understanding what makes us tick from the head to the toe. And so, of course, I went to university for that. And I was convinced that I would have something to do with wellness and psychology and physical exertion, whether it be physiology or all the way through to medicine. In order to pay for my university, I decided that I would give this franchise thing a crack. It was a student painting company that I kind of fell upon, as you do most things. And it was the big draw for me was, I get to work outside during the summer. How amazing. Canada, you get a very short period of time.
Take advantage when it is not cold.
So I was like, great. I'll paint houses. I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah, great. Sign me up. And so after being a painter for a year, they approached me and they were like, you're a leader, you're a born leader. Why don't you own a franchise? Obviously they sell, right? It's like, yeah, definitely. That's what I want to do. What can I make in 4 months? Yeah, cool. Sign me up. And so I did that and I kind of fell into the world of business at that point. I was learning how to cold call. I was learning how to sell door to door, not forgetting. And this was all happening during the winter that you ramp up, get all your sales, get pipeline, and then turn that across into sales for the summer. I really got the bug. I started to love business. I started to love leadership and empowering other people. They were all university students as well. So they were on their own journey. I started to jump into self-development and a bit of psychology, what makes people tick. And I started to kind of get a little bit worried. I was like, oh God, I love this. And I've got 2 years of uni left. At this point, I was coming into the final year and I was going, I just need to finish and then I'll figure out what to do. So I graduated, still loved business, and was very much, okay, what am I going to do now? I really have to choose. Either I go down sort of a business and sales pathway, or I stick with sports and sport medicine and I go down that road. I decided to take some time off to go on a trip. As we do, you do your gap year. It wasn't called that in Canada, but I went to Europe with one of my best friends at the time, and I left. And I remember my mom saying to me, your life will not be the same. When you come back, you will be a different person. And I really, truly was. I met my now husband while I was over there in Amsterdam. He's actually Australian. And my whole perception of the way my world had worked completely shifted. So fast forward a year, I was living in Australia. I had sold my 2 franchise items at that time. I had sold all my assets and then landed in Sydney, kind of going, right, now what do I do? Everything I've known my entire world. I didn't know what Commonwealth Bank was when I got here. You know, I didn't know anything. And so I knew I could do sales. I knew I was really good at that, but also that I loved it. I loved people interaction. And so I landed in recruitment, as we do as our expats from offshore. And they kind of wrote me in. And they originally said, okay, you're going to do sales recruitment. I was like, great. I know sales. I know salespeople. I can do that. And then I was promptly told, actually, no, we forgot you had a science background. No, you're going to tech. You have a brain for it. Let's go for tech. And I was like, no, I don't know tech. Absolutely not. I'm not going into an industry I don't know, as well as a domain I don't know. After a little bit of twisting of the arms and a little bit of a salary increase,
that'll do it.
It'll do it. I got the bug for it. I landed in tech, and within a couple of weeks, I absolutely adored it. I started to realize all the parallels that I loved about science and tech, and how all of a sudden these two worlds were colliding. And of course, sales and recruitment is sales. I did not know this, but it definitely is. So after spending 4 years in that company and growing and completely developing as an individual, and I was very lucky to do very well through that period of 4 years, I then decided, okay, I really miss business ownership. And the MD of that company who actually hired me, we had talked about business, and he had owned businesses in the past and he'd been very successful. And we went, you know what? Let's go out and do this on our own. Fast forward 10 years, Firesoft just turned 10.
Congratulations.
10 years.
On the anniversary.
Yes, thank you very much. And the business has iterated a million times in that 10 years. It's changed, it's developed, and it's grown alongside its founders. I always say that a business will never outgrow its founder or founders. And so it's changed a lot. So in the past 3 years, we've actually split the 2 brands. So we have now Firesoft People and Intelligent. Intelligent spun off the back of Firesoft in an interesting way, in that I noticed a market in business intelligence analytics, and there was a lot of consulting work to be done. We were already doing a lot of consulting through a very sort of different agreement under Firesoft head, and that started to grow, become its own entity. Intelligent was born. So now 4th year of Intelligent on, 10 years of Firesoft. I'm managing 2 babies. I have one at home and one in my stomach now. So we are very busy all the time. And of course, I am adoring what I do.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that overview. And as often as we speak via voice notes and WhatsApp, there is still elements of that story that I didn't know. So it was new information for me as well. And it's amazing. Congratulations on the baby in your belly as well.
Thank you.
I always remember you talking about how your first maternity leave was the best thing that's ever happened to you in your career, because you had to plan and systemize to get things to a place where you knew you weren't going to be in the business. That was really a game changer for you, wasn't it?
It changed everything. There was a huge, oh, dare I throw the ego word? We're so early into this. We're going to throw it out.
You know we're going to go deep quick.
I was going to go there. But no, there was a total ego attachment to the fact that I thought my business needed me in the way that I effectively needed it for my sense of identity. And so as I started to kind of pull the pieces apart, and as you plan for mat leave, you're planning to not be there, right? And so I was sort of putting things into categories, and I know we've talked about this. I was very systematic about it. And I started to realize that there were less and less things that were actually only I can do categories. And that was confronting in so many ways, because I started to realize that actually what I had built was actually scalable beyond me. And I really had to confront that feeling of, it doesn't need me. Yes, I am the magic behind what happens here, because of course it's my, vision and all of those things. But for a small period of time, this thing will continue running without me if I set it up properly. So yeah, that was interesting.
And it's all about setting it up properly. I think as leaders, it is figuring out that systemization and you're right, it is ego. And I work with so many startups and scale ups, and I think they grow as quickly as the founder will be able to let go, because the more involved you want to be, the more hands-on and in control you want to be, the more you're going to actually get in your own way and get in the way of the business. And I've seen it happen so many times. So it's a fantastic thing to learn. And it's amazing that having had Ollie and going through that whole experience with your first bub, that's what's kind of got you to that place. You spoke obviously about the fact that your business over 10 years has had many iterations. And I know that from my own experience, the job I have now today, 7 years into Lotus People, versus the one I had on day one, versus the one I had during the pandemic, versus the one I'll probably have in 6 months' time, it's so different. What in its current state do you love? Like, what are the things that kind of, because there's so much stuff, there's so much noise, there's so much going on, like there's a lot happening. But when we think about what we do love about the work we do, what kind of jumps to mind in your current role?
So over the years, I have honed in on what I love. And I've been lucky that I've had that playground to do that. And I think as the years go by, you stop doing every bit of the pieces and wearing all the hats all the time that are necessity. And you then gravitate towards the things that are your highest value purpose or your highest value tasks that then yield the most outcome. And those are often the things that you love to do. And so 10 years in business, I am so lucky that I am genuinely, and this is when I'm playing in Firesoft land, doing the things I love to do, which are the strategy things, the creation things, the things around systems and processes, and really creating a scalable business that empowers people. You know, I know my values now as a grown adult, like to say. Do not feel like a grown adult.
Faking it till we make it as on the adult front.
Yeah, 100%. But I think that's, if it's aligned in terms of my values, and so much around that is the empowerment piece. And that comes down to the people in the business, that it comes down to their individual trajectories and their individual strengths and utilizing them and maximizing what we call the matrix within our business, in that you're not always going to have people that fit into a square box. You are going to have people that are on the peripheral and have beautiful skills that are sort of in the gray area that might not be on their job spec. And then how do you empower them to expand that? How do you empower them to step either laterally or vertically within their role? And so I'm so passionate about that and making sure that we have crossover. You know, we think about agile and the way agile works, and there's that kind of matrix that, you know, isn't traditionally applied to recruitment. And it does in our environment because it's been something I've been so passionate about. So my day-to-day in Firesoft looks very, very different to the days that I was building the business and doing all the sales and the strategy and out there on the floor and really kind of hitting the ground with clients and, you know, creating what we now have: systems, processes, brand, everything. So I spend a lot more time with people, a lot more time with clients, face-to-face, doing strategy, time, you know, sitting behind the books and figuring out where we're headed and how we're going to grow and how we're going to scale. And I love that stuff. It's what I love to do.
And I love what you said about just creating that, kind of tailoring it to people's strengths. And it's something that really resonates because I'm so passionate about that as well, and about people development and the promotions that have happened at Lotus People. We've made like 5 promotions even over the last month. And the promotions that have happened over the last 7 years haven't been cookie cutter. We have created things for people. We've created roles. We've continued to sort of innovate with what that progression looks like. And I think that's so important. I want to kind of latch onto something you said there about strengths, because I do think that the secret to success is understanding your own strengths and then playing to them. I think when I had that realization as a leader a few years into running Lotus, it kind of changed the game for me because I was trying to do everything.
Yeah.
And actually, if you figure out and know and have that self-awareness as to what you're actually good at, the more you play to that and the more you align with that, the more you feel like you're in flow and less like you're kind of pushing against something. So I know for me, Myers-Briggs, Gallup, all of these sort of tools that I know they're sort of, and not everyone loves them. They're a little bit out there for some people, but I've found them really helpful myself. How did you figure out, because you know yourself well, right? You are so emotionally intelligent. You work on personal growth and development. How did you find out your strengths? Like, was that just a sort of a thing that happened?
It's such a good question. And I think it's one that, again, matures and develops and grows as you grow as a leader. There's probably two sort of avenues for addressing here. One being, there's that sort of psychologically based acknowledgement towards strengths. You can fill in a million questions, then you can get those answers spat back at you, Gallup being one of them, let's say. And I have done those. What I found really fascinating was when I did those and received my strengths back, I was like, yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, brilliant. Excellent. Oh, there's a different one. Okay, cool. For the majority though, they were the things that I had identified. And it was really empowering to then sit back and go, okay, like that really reinforces what I know about myself. Figuring out your strengths is actually, it's hard work. It's hard work and it can be really confronting work because I think what happens is sometimes, particularly when we're in a sales environment, which of course recruitment primarily is, we can sort of, there's this kind of ideal persona of the salesperson. They are, highly driven. They're highly extroverted. They're out there speaking to people. They aren't probably as focused, let's say on the detail of the strategy or the behind the scenes stuff, but they are out there driving. They're making money. They're shaking the tree and they're making it rain. And I think as salespeople, sometimes we try and aspire to be that prototype without acknowledging that actually maybe we are an introverted extrovert, which I know we've had a lot of discussions about before.
I'm nodding furiously in response to everything you're saying.
And maybe we do actually love the back end systems processes, more of the soft stuff that doesn't necessarily translate into cash immediately, but that is so paramount in terms of scale. We might be the people who are more connecting in terms of our people and our culture and so there's a really interesting battle of an ego that I had to go through in order to kind of acknowledge that actually, no, I don't need to be this typical salesperson prototype. I can own my own sort of being. I can own the way I do things. I do not do things like your typical recruiter. And I was just about to throw a nationality in there and I'm not going to.
Don't do it. We can't be getting in trouble already.
Exactly. I'm not going to do it. But look, I'm just not. And, it's funny because a lot of people have said that to me over the years. You're like, you're not a recruiter. And I'm like, no, that's cool because I don't pretend to be. Like I do things in a different way. But the only reason I'm comfortable on that side of the conversation is because I've owned it and I've really done the work to figure out what I'm strong at. Mm-hmm. The rest of it, I then surround myself with people who have identified within themselves what they're good at.
Yep.
And so if they can identify it and they really can own it, then I can work with that. Mm-hmm. If there's somebody who sits in wearing a mask and going, no, I'm this, no, I'm that, no, I'm that. And I can feel the dissonance in the conversation. I can feel the fact that there's a struggle internally. Mm-hmm. I'm going, are you though? Mm-hmm. Do you love that? Mm-hmm. And quite often interviews with me are very different. And again, I've had that feedback where people are going, oh my God, I nearly cried. And you're like, okay, I'm not intending for you to cry. It's not a counseling session.
I was about to say therapy session.
But it's really important to get into the human. Yeah. Because it's not to say that we're looking for somebody in a box. That's not what we do at Firesoft People. And so, I really, have that conversation ahead of time to say, hey, there's no right or wrong here. But what I want to know is, do you know yourself? Do you know your strengths? Do you know what you love? And if you don't, I might ask you some questions that might be a bit confronting. Are you okay with that? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of that side of it. The other side, you talked a little bit about going into your own sort of value and being in flow. I think when we know our own value, we know what flow feels like. We know when we're out of flow by actually pretending to be something we're not. You're nodding because I know we've had this conversation as well. I think half of my life at the moment, now that I've kind of really fine-tuned a lot of the little pieces around who I am, what I do, what I love, what I'm best at, I'm now acknowledging when am I not in flow? And half my life right now is how do I own that bounce? Mm-hmm. How do I own the bounce between not being in flow and being back in flow? How do I pick away at all the pieces of the puzzle that allow me to jump back into flow? We all know what flow means. We know flow means you're in a state of doing, creating, being. Things come to you. It's an energetic state. We've talked about this. I'm not going to go woo-woo at you. But it is one of those things where we actually have gravitational energy, and it's that pull as opposed to that push. Mm-hmm. And so that is in alignment with doing what we love.
100%. And when you have that awareness of your own strengths, and as you said, surround yourself by people who also know theirs, it creates that structure and that environment for things to flow. And when things are in flow state, it feels like you're on the right path. You're not, as I said before, pushing up against things. And it really, really resonated what you're saying around that kind of recruitment personality. And I think that's what I have loved so much about our industry over the last few years. And this obviously isn't specific to recruitment. Many people who don't work in recruitment will be listening to this as well. But it has changed so much. And I think it applies to all industry sectors, because when I first started in recruitment probably 10 years ago, exactly as you said, the fit was to be extroverted, to be kind of terrible at admin and systems, to be kind of this personality that felt so at odds with kind of what I knew I was good at. And the recruitment today, I kind of started Lotus with a view to disrupt that and to change it. And to one of my kind of pitches at the very, very beginning when we were so early into it and had a few staff was, we're not your classic recruiter personality, and everyone I hire goes against the grain of that. And we've continued to do that. But I think the thing for me in particular was, I remember reading a book by Susan Cain called Quiet, and it was all about introverts operating in an extroverted world. And it just landed. I was like, oh yeah, that's me. I guess I'm an introvert. And it just gave me such power to stop trying to fit the mold of a personality that I knew I wasn't and was draining me to try and be. And the world of recruitment now is one where content marketing is king, and where kind of the tricks to success, which as an introvert, you can listen. I mean, everyone can do this. This isn't just obviously for an introvert, but I know for me, my skills that I have, they absolutely apply to the world of work that we live in now. And I think that's so important for everyone to know, because what you think you are good at and what you think the role or the career you might want is, like, it doesn't need to be so black and white. It can be malleable. It can be flexible. And there's no reason why you can do it in your authentic, genuine way. I think I would have burnt out. I mean, recruitment's easy enough to burn out in any way, but I probably would have burnt out a lot sooner if I had continued to try to fit into something that was so against the grain of how I operated and how I was. With the burnout, and touching on that, because it's something that, I mean, I've spoken about it before. After setting up Lotus, we were so successful so quickly, which is incredible. But 12 months in, I was working kind of 14-hour days, getting takeaway to the office before Deliveroo was a thing. I was absolutely going on 1 million meetings a week, starting my day at 6 p.m. in the evening to try and find candidates. And amazing that it's been this success story, but also it was bloody exhausting. And I know for me, my ability to intuitively understand myself, my limits, my energy preservation, my proximity to burnout. I'm so hyper aware of all of that. You have a kid, another on the way, family overseas rather than immediate family support here. Like, how do you manage the blend? And I know this isn't a give me your answer in a sentence, Erin, because this is an ongoing conversation that we have to really try and nut this one out. But tell us where you've got to with that.
The lull on this is funny because, of course, every time you and I catch up, I'm like, God, I'm not doing well with balance right now. And do you know
Which
what?
is the key. You're never done.
That's exactly where I'm going with that, though. That is exactly it. I think There's an acknowledgement to the fact that we will never, ever have it perfect. We will never be in a state of complete and utter balance where we have everything all at once at one time. And I think I've really finally reconciled that and realized that, especially as a woman, as a business owner of 2 businesses now, and now, potentially in a couple of months, 2 children, that completely has to be truth for me. Everything, and I know I've talked about this before, but everything is in seasons. And I think there's a time and a place for everything. What my last 3 weeks have been like. They've been burning the candle. And that was a time and a place situation. It was a compartmentalized, requirement and necessity based on everything that's going on. And I often very much communicate this with my husband. And, I sit down with Rob ahead and I say, look, this is what my next month is going to look like. And, I think there's that communication piece and that acknowledgement that, okay, I need your support. There's other times where I can back up, and then he steps and he ramps up what he needs to do with his career and his personal life and social and all that stuff. And so I'm lucky in that I have that balance at home and that acknowledgement and that understanding. I think not putting pressure on having it all now at the same time is something that I've constantly over and over and over had to remind myself of. It's not something that you just say once and then you lock it in. We're high performers. We're perfectionists. We're people who always move the bar. We are pushing that bar higher, higher, higher. And I think there's an element of realizing, like, when do you step back and look behind you and acknowledge, okay, I did that. Mm-hmm. And I achieved that. And there's this high achiever. I'm reading The Molecule of More right now. And I know I've talked to you about this, but it's all about dopamine. And as high performers and high achievers, we're pushing that dopamine hit. We're pushing to the next thing. We're pushing to achieve that sense. It's called a dopaminergic sense and feeling. We're chasing that feeling. And I think I've really kind of acknowledged that over the years, that actually I'm chasing that feeling of success. But now, what does it mean? Is it at the detriment of my health? Is it at the detriment of my relationships, my work life? Am I spreading myself too thin? Am I getting sick? I can feel this coming on. So as I sort of ramp up, I fall over the line and I go, oh God, why did I do that again? Why am I here again? Mm-hmm. I back up. I reassess, I time block, I get rid of the non-critical things in my next 2 or 3 weeks. I really sort of hone in on what's most important. And I think those are those cycles where you ramp up, you level out, you recharge, you rest. It's the people that ramp up and go way over what their capacity is. Those are the ones burning out. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones pushing way past what their capacity is and not then leveling out. Mm-hmm. So there's a mental, but there's also a physical component to all of that. Mm-hmm. Foundation being, where are you headed? What's the horizon look like? Will you get there? And if you will, how can you get creative? How can you get creative around your energy stores, your resources, the support networks around you? And how can you do it in a way that you're not hurting yourself, you're not hurting those around you, and you're empowering people along the way? Mm-hmm. For me, that's the most important.
100%. And yes, you're right. I think it is seasons. There will be times, particularly when you run a business or in work or no matter kind of your situation, there'll be times where you do just need to say, okay, this is what's going on. This is going to take a lot from me. And then it's balancing energy outside of work as well, right? And it's funny talking about dopamine. I notice when I am reaching a stage of being very tired and being kind of getting that burnt out feeling of just constant Zoom meetings, constant day to day, like hour to hour, day to day, just totally blocked out. And like it does drain. It takes its toll. It's mental fatigue. But what I notice I do in those times is I absolutely lean on kind of picking up my phone and refreshing things because my brain's tired and too tired probably to focus on anything meaningful, but it's looking for the dopamine hit. It needs the hit of, okay, I'll refresh LinkedIn, I'll refresh Instagram, and I know it's making me more tired and I can actually watch it in myself. I have the awareness to see it, but I don't necessarily stop it. And it's an interesting place to be because I think the more we get like that, it's that classic kind of thing around nutrition as well. Like when we're tired and when we're run down and we haven't time to prepare, we grab kind of crap food and food that kind of makes us feel worse rather than nutritious food and food full of sugar. And it's that same thing. I think when we reach a point of kind of tipping over the edge of having a good kind of storage of energy, that's when everything starts to become a little bit harder, and then poor choices are made, and then people stop exercising. So it's important to sort of to catch early on, but it's something I'm so passionate about. I've spoken so much about it over the years, and I don't think there is a silver bullet. I think that no matter what industry you're in, no matter what job you're in, what I do know is that other people aren't going to make those decisions for you. You absolutely need to, as an individual, be aware of your own boundaries and be aware of kind of when enough is enough, and kind of speaking to, whether it's leaders, whether it's managers, whether it's family members, as you say, support system. It's just making sure that you yourself have those boundaries in place, because it is not going to come from anyone else. You might have very good people who spot it in you, but it really is up to you to kind of say, do you know what, I'm going to need to pare back or hire someone else or whatever it might be. It can be quite full on.
This podcast is sponsored by Lotus People Recruitment. We are an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency with a genuine human-first and innovative approach. Lotus People are disrupting the recruitment industry by placing quality and service at the heart of all we do. Recruiting roles across HR, talent, business support, and much more. Head to our website today for more information if you are a job seeker or an employer hiring staff. We're at lotuspeople.com.au.
And I do think, one of the kind of key points, which you kind of rewind all the way to the beginning of the year, let's just call it that. And you do this as well. And it's something that, I think as leaders who are high performing, we have to do this. But you look ahead in your year and you block weekends out or long weekends, and you schedule little trips or little moments. And I joke, and we call them lily pads at home. We're like, when's the next lily pad?
I love that.
They're little frogs. But literally, like, we're just kind of jumping from lily pad to lily pad all year. But if you don't schedule that way in advance, there will always be something that comes up that you go, oh, I had blocked this out, but I have this, and this now. And so if you don't book those holidays, people are always like, oh, you guys find the greatest Airbnbs and da-da-da. I'm like, yeah, it's because we booked it 7 months ago, because we were sitting back going, what does this year look like? And we're going to need a break here, 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 and here. And those are non-negotiable. Unless someone gets COVID, we'll be there.
And you did get COVID, and you still went.
And this is actually, yes, this is very true.
I shouldn't say you still went. It sounded like you were breaking the rules. You were there when you got here.
Not saying that's not correct. However, no, we got it in Byron. So we're technically still
and then
there.
Didn't leave the Airbnb that's because you're very rule-abiding citizens.
Thanks for backing me up there.
Exactly. And even, it's so crucial for anyone who is busy in their career and in what they do to have those breaks. I was just back from 2 weeks in Hawaii, the first trip, non-Ireland related trip, which of course counts, but it's also family. It's different to kind of travel. But 2 weeks in Hawaii, I honestly came back last Tuesday, and it took me 2 or 3 days to remember what I did for a living. And whilst I was joking, it kind of, I forgot these kind of big projects, and it took me a couple of days to get back into it. And just how amazing to have only 2 weeks off and switch off so much. My emails that morning, though, that Tuesday morning, I screenshotted and sent it to you, 600 unread emails. Oh, the anxiety was real. I can assure you it made me anxious as well. But again, it's so important to take those rests and take those breaks, and everyone manages things in different ways. I know some people who would never be able to turn off emails for that long, but again, what's stopping you? That's just a cognitive thing. That's a block, rather than, like, I know that I probably had a few things in there I could have responded to faster, but what was more important was having a team in place who can look after everything, and also having a mental break where I'm not actually waking up thinking about work, dreaming about work.
You achieve so much more when you can fully switch off.
Yeah.
And I think if we start to try and limp our way through a holiday and we have our emails open, if we're, just chucking emails here, there, and everywhere, we're not actually fully relieving the brain of all of that extra stimulus and all of that extra noise that is half the battle, right? And I think there's two elements behind that. Can you trust your team? And are you then able to trust your team? There's two different questions there. And I think that are you able to trust your team is the hardest one. We are control freaks. And, half of the battle is pulling back and acknowledging the why behind that, acknowledging what that will result when we get back. And that expansive brain can kind of have time to be creative, think differently. Lateral thinking is expanded in a huge way. And so I think these things are all so important to make that decision.
100%. And
I'm proud that you did that.
Thank you. I was proud of myself. It happened easier than I was. I had one text from my best friend Laura going, I'm not okay with your emails being on. And before she'd even got the chance to say why, I'd turned them off.
Good.
I'd sent the email saying, guys, I'm off, and it was done. And you're right. Touching on that, I think it's the brain side. I know when I've been close to burnout and really run down, and I suffered from chronic fatigue syndrome, which saw me out of the business for a couple of months on the back of absolute adrenal fatigue and burnout way back when I started Lotus. And I think the brain piece it's the amygdala, it's the fight or flight, it's your brain constantly sort of being in overdrive. But then also from a body perspective, the physiological perspective, it's your nervous system, the things we do to our nervous system when we are on screen and kind of running from thing to thing and not being mindful and not stopping to take a breath and not sort of being present in what we're doing. It can erode your health over time. It can erode your mental health. It can really impact. So yeah, everything you're touching on, it's so important. I want to ask you about the last 2 years. It's the reason for creating this podcast is because as a recruiter, I'm having, and my team are having, so many conversations with people about what has changed for them. I love how much has changed. I love the future of work. I love the rise of remote working. I love the increase in flexibility. But what we're seeing predominantly is individuals wanting to align themselves and leave their existing business and align themselves with organizations with strong value-led approaches and values-based leadership. And that's kind of, I guess, the shift and the change that we're seeing in so many people. The energy is different. What people want to do with their days and their weeks is different. So there's so much I could ask about the last 2 years. Sum it up now.
Yeah, totally.
But from I guess, thinking about loving your work and thinking about sort of what has changed, how has the last 2 years kind of been for you in your perspective and how you view work and that side of things?
So much.
I know, it's such a big question. Give me the answer in a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
no, I'm joking.
So there's obviously what I've experienced as a business owner and, the uncertainty and the complete washing machine that I've called the past 2 years. It's been a washing machine. It really has, from a time perspective, from a productivity and awareness and people and perspective. There's just so many things that the past 2 years have provided. But I think the overarching sentiment for me was I had been for years, and this is like back into like franchise days. So I say years and it's like 15 to 18 years. I'd been asking, and jokingly, but kind of not, for the big pause button. The big pause button that we all wish we could just push.
Yes.
And I had wanted it and had all these beautiful and amazing dreams for when that big pause button presented itself. And it came. And all of a sudden, the big pause button was terrifying. It was terrifying. It challenged my sense of self-worth. It challenged myself in ways that I had never expected with respect to dealing with real human crisis on every ounce of every bit of every day. Mm-hmm. It was the full counselor mode for 12 hours a day, especially during, and you'll remember this, during those first lockdown months where we were all thrown into a work from home environment. We were all figuring it out. Everyone had concerns and issues around, not only health, of course, because that was front and center. Am I going to die? But also, am I going to keep my job? Is my family going to be okay? Are we going to be able to put food on the table? Like, what does this look like as a business owner then going, how are we going to keep this floating? We were very, very lucky in that we were very solid, and because we were an older business, but I was seeing businesses around me crumble that were not nearly as mature or years gone by. I mean, they just didn't have that ability to kind of dip into the reserves. And I think, our industry being tech, we were lucky that we were still doing work. Intelligent on the other side ramped up because the requirement for business intelligence analytics and all of these things to really get under the hood with numbers and how to best preserve during that period was required. And so we had a really beautiful balance in that period. But that didn't change the fact that I was sitting in my home office, which was also my bedroom, looking outside going, what do I do? Mm-hmm. Also, how am I so uncomfortable being quiet right now?
Absolutely.
It was terrifying. I have a business coach and a psychologist, business psychologist, and I remember having a conversation with him. And I said, Matt, I don't know my value right now. I'm not doing anything that's pushing my business forward, and it's terrifying. And he's like, you've been talking about having this time for so long. Utilize it. What are you going to do? And so then I went the complete opposite way. I decided that I was going to work 24 hours a day. I know you remember this period of time.
You created an entire portal. You were absolutely going together. You created the busy when there was space.
Literally. I was so exhausted. So what we did was we created this online portal, which was effectively a website that I was building myself with all the COVID sort of response requirements. We partnered with Employment Hero to build all of the sort of out of office and HR legals behind what was going on, and unprecedented, right? Nobody had built any HR legals for what do you do when you work from home or any of that. So there was this massive, we were partnering with small businesses and providing cross collaboration discounts, and all of this stuff was happening. And all of a sudden got it up and running. This was like 2 weeks of full on flat chat. And then I sat back again and went, right, God, it's quiet again.
What's next?
Now what? And so I think that finally was the time for me to sit back and go, okay, what do I love? What is important here? What are the things in my life that I am going to then cherish? What kind of things around moving slower am I going to try and bring into the post-pandemic world? Because at that point, I knew there was no way that this way of working was sustainable. This level of shutdown was sustainable economically as well as psychologically. And I knew that there would be a bounce. And so I started to kind of ground and level a little bit and kind of figure out, what is it that we want to look like? And what do I want to look like post bounce? Mm-hmm. And so then the language in my team changed. It changed from crisis to empowerment and to, I guess, optimization. Who are you right now? And what are you going to do? Well, all of our team meetings changed from sales targets to gratitude, to moments of projection around learning, education, upskilling, technology. We leaned way in to our tech function. And that's when we really expanded all of our sort of back office technology functioning and all of the tools that the guys now use. We leaned way into marketing. We leaned way into, client and candidate focused give back. And the industry sort of shifted, didn't it? Everybody kind of leaned that way. And I'm really excited to see now post sort of bounce that everyone's now continuing to focus on the values, to focus on, what it means to be a human, not a worker. There's just totally, totally different psychology around that. And I think the people, let's say the candidates in our world, they're choosing now. They're choosing who's going to treat them like a whole human, not just a productivity, busy bee. It's, can you be flexible? Can we treat you like an adult? Can we give you that environment that allows you to thrive? Can we not put you in a box and allow you to expand your gray areas and empower you to be the best version of you? Not just what we need from you, but fully what you can express of yourself. And so I think there's expectations that are well and truly rising along that. And if organizations are not providing that environment, they're going to get left behind. Because that is the new world. We are looking at humans as a holistic human now. And, for myself, I work from home 2 or 3 days a week now. Like that was unheard of. Our entire business.
In our industry, unheard of. We were people facing all day long, meetings in person all day, every day.
The balance and the way that the work has shifted, particularly in a sales sort of driven environment, it's incredible. And it's so encouraging. It allows people to have a life. It allows for, we're in Sydney. People were traveling like an hour a day, right? So you've got 2 hours times 3 days. You're looking at 6 hours already, right? Where people are just not productive. They're just driving, or they're on the trains, and they're either listening to music or trying to, zone in, zone out. Yes, of course, we're doing emails and doing little things here and there, but it's a very different feeling. I think people are getting their lives back. They're picking their kids up from school. They're actually attending events that they wouldn't otherwise have been able to, let's say soccer practice or something like that, that people are having a lot more sort of engagement with life outside of work. And I think brilliant. I'm grateful for the pandemic for that. There is no way we would have shifted on that paradigm and that level if we weren't all put under such a pressure cooker.
It was a rapid acceleration. I think it was maybe what the next 10 years of work could have started to inch towards, but we did it in a very, very fast, very, very, very urgent, for want of a better word.
Painful is what you really meant to say.
Tricky. It was tricky.
Challenging.
But you're so right. And I think the experience and putting kind of the healthcare aspect aside, because that's a given, right? The risk of health, the concern for health, the people impacted, the families impacted, and that was obviously the biggest kind of fear with the pandemic. But speaking specifically about kind of work and I guess a professional setting, that uncertainty and running a business in an industry that was it was all over the news, it was all over the media, it was every single business was making, maybe not every business was making cuts, but every business was freezing hiring. Most businesses were making cuts. Most people were making redundancies. Individuals were left with no work. They were left with kind of a job keeper or job seeker not covering their rent and mortgages. And so the whole thing was this horrible, drastic, uncertain time for so many people. But what it has done is exactly as you've described. It's created this environment where it gave us so much time to pause, and we have created the future of work essentially overnight in a relative sort of way. It's overnight. And I absolutely love it. I love the way we work now. I love the value on just how much that kind of the home life can be blended with the work life, and work-life balance has always just been a phrase thrown around. And I don't even know if people have that at the moment, to be fair, because I think people are doing as much from home, if not more. So it's definitely not that, but there's just that understanding and that flexibility. And I think businesses, and I see it so often, businesses who are not catching on to that, and businesses who aren't sort of on the forefront of what the new world looks like, and flexibility and remote working, and it will differ. What works will differ from business to business. It's not everything is going to suit everyone, and it's definitely a conversation we'll delve way more into over the kind of course of the conversations for this podcast. But I do think those that aren't doing anything and kind of living in the past and white knuckling the way things were,
holding on for dear life, aren't they?
It's not going to work. So it's an interesting time, but I'm here for it. I mean, even me personally, I went to Ireland for 3 months at the end of the last lockdown last year, and spent 3 months with my family, and I worked mental hours. I worked 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. And I got to be there. I got to be present. I did webinars in the middle of the night for Seek. I was waking up at 1 a.m. kind of staring at the wall, figuring out how I was going to be articulate imminently. And yeah, that's all because of the way it's set up now. So I'm forever grateful for that. I'm definitely less run down. I get colds less. I feel like I'm a healthier human, even though I'm working as hard, if not harder, and have done over the last few years. So I'm most definitely here for it. In thinking about anyone listening who loves that you love your work, but perhaps they don't love their work, is there any advice that you can give someone who feels like, whether it's the role they're in, they might have outgrown it, or whether it's the career, what advice would you share with anyone who doesn't love what they do?
Absolutely. And do you know what? I think being in the industry we're in, we hear this all the time.
Primed to respond to this one.
Right. I'm so glad you asked.
Tested daily.
But I mean, there's two parallel answers here. There's one where you start thinking about the mechanics, right? You start thinking about, okay, go do a Gallup strengths test, go online, sign up for it, get your 30 strengths, top 10, highlight them. Really hone into that, understand there is science behind that really gives you the guiding sort of signpost to who you are as a human. That's the scientific side, right? That's the kind of you know, I'm not calling it a magic pill by any means, but it's a good starting point if you've not started on any of this kind of journey before. The other side of it, though, is the actual hard yards. Got to dig into your own psyche and your own self and start highlighting the moments for yourself where you felt the time flew by. What were you doing when the time absolutely flew by and you looked at the clock and you went, oh my God, how is it, X o'clock? Those are the moments when you're in flow. They're the moments that you're doing what you're meant to be doing, your highest purpose, your highest value. And those are the times that you kind of have to step back and go, okay, what was in there? What was it that I was doing? The slight little segue, but the Firesoft logo is two intersecting circles. One is do what you love. The other one is do what you're good at. And if you can find the middle of that and get paid for that, that is where you're going to thrive. And you're going to love every day that you do it because it's not work then. Mm-hmm. And I know this is very sort of cliche, do what you love and you'll never work another day in your life. Like we've all heard that.
I do not believe that, by the way. I love what I do and I work hard every day and I feel it.
And that is exactly where I'm headed with this, right? It is not freaking rainbows and butterflies. And I was going to swear then I won't. I said I wouldn't swear.
Oh, you're welcome to. I don't believe we'll have any child listeners.
But look, there is no magic bullet here. There is no quick way to success. And there are days where I'm grinding and I'm like, dude, I hate this. I'm in the detail. I'm doing the numbers. I'm doing the minutia, reading legal documents, whatever it might be. And I openly say to whoever's around me and whoever's going to listen, I'm not in my happy place right now because I think they all kind of look at me and go, oh, she just flits around and she's always in a good mood and she's loving what she does. And I openly communicate when I'm not in my happy place because I think it's really healthy to get honest about our jobs and our lives. People know we love what we do, but we don't show up every day and freaking love everything. We can't, there's no environment where that's ever going to be possible. I think the key is whatever environment you're in, does it enable you to express the fullest value of who you are? And does it enable you to grow outside your comfort zone? Does it give you that space to, on the majority, live your best life, love what you do, all those beautiful little sayings. Mm-hmm. So I think there's the hard yards in finding it.
Yeah.
Then you can go psychology route. Then you can go kind of more of that route where you figure it out by the actual science behind it.
Yeah.
If you can blend those two and actually use them as signposts and then figure out, can I do that in my current job? If the answer is mostly no, hard question you have to ask of yourself. Mm-hmm. Is my life worth sitting here miserable? Or do I have to get uncomfortable for a period of time? Maybe I have to go lateral. Maybe I have to take 2 steps back to go forward. Do I have to train up? Do I have to scale up? What is my skills gap? And then figure it out. If there's enough of a why, people will do anything.
That's it. And it's finding it's grit and it's graft and it's not easy. If you're not there, it's not easy. It might be a case of figuring out, what, actually these are my strengths and let me have a conversation with leadership. And actually I know exactly that this is the direction I want to go in, but for others, it might be more of a leap. But I totally agree. It's not easy. It's never easy. And I think in figuring it out, as well as looking at yourself and trying to do that self-analysis, I think speak to friends and family. They know you sometimes better than you know yourself. Yes. And they know your strengths, they know what you're good at. And so that's definitely something that I would recommend doing. And I know for me, when I did kind of figure out the bits, and it was during the pandemic, it was, whilst this external environment is so stressful and so uncertain, I know the bits within that. It's the facilitating and creating connection. It's the kind of creating the value adds through webinars and bringing people together. It's the inviting people on to come and talk to me like this. These are the bits that I love. And it's then kind of allowing that to be relevant to your job.
We're lucky that we get to create that.
Exactly. This podcast, I'm not sure if it's work related, but I'm having a lovely time. Passion project, we shall call it. So no, that makes total sense. And I think it's worth looking at, because I think when you are in that flow and you do kind of spend your days doing something that you enjoy and you find rewarding, and that doesn't kind of leave you wondering what you're doing with your life, it's worthwhile, and it's so important.
And often that's when the money comes.
Yeah, and that's abundance.
It is.
It's a state of abundance. It's flow. That's when things come more easily than if, as I said before, you're pushing up against something. You're amazing. It's a good place to leave it.
Likewise.
We could talk all day. We do talk all day.
I was just going to say, this is like an extended voice note that we leave for one another.
Exactly. We'll revert back to the voice notes on WhatsApp once this is over. Thank you so much for being with me today. It's amazing. I know that everyone will take so much from this conversation. You're an absolute inspiration, and I'm very grateful to have you here.
Likewise. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you.